different video today. Basically, I was at the Wilsons of Sharrow Snuff factory yesterday. Spectacular day. Thanks so much for the guys there for being so hospitable to us. I didn't quite get as much video and pictures as I wanted to. I originally wanted to interview Colin, who's the mill manager there. He didn't seem too keen on the idea. I don't think he really wanted to be on camera. Like I say, I wanted to take more pictures, more videos, but I just got so engrossed in the whole factory and everything about Wilsons that it just completely crossed my mind. It was like a complete and utter maze inside there. The place inside is unbelievable. You're just going through rooms, down corridors, into rooms, and I was lost most of the time. It was a spectacular day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. There is a bit of footage, but most of it's just me going through what I picked up and basically the history of Wilsons. So enjoy the video, folks. So Wilsons, the history of Wilsons and snuff manufacture in the UK is long. It goes back a long way. 275 years to the year this year that Wilsons have been producing. Well, Wilsons have been in the Sharrow mills. They've been making the snuff there for about 265, 270 years, sort of thing. So I'm just quickly going to go over the history of Wilsons. Basically, Thomas Wilson first came to Sharrow Mills in 1737. He was a very, very well-renowned silversmith and metal worker in Sheffield. In 1931, he was the master of the renowned Cutler Company. In 1740, his son Joseph took over, who at the time was heavily associated with Bolsover and the creation of Sheffield plate. But even though it's his family tradition, his true obsession lay with snuff. Basically, like many people of the time, snuff was a very, very, very popular product, complete opposite to what it is now, sort of thing. Basically, around that time, he started producing snuffs at the Sharrow mills, so using the Waterwheel, as well as making saws and beating metal and plating metals and things like that. He also produced snuff there. In 1757, he completely and utterly revamped the place. It was exclusively for snuff. And that's where basically the story begins. The Sharrow Mills first appeared on maps in 1757 as well, after it was rebuilt. By 1760, all they did was produce snuff. That was it, full stop, just snuff manufacturers. Around about 1760 is when Wilson's Best SP was first introduced. Now, I was always under the impression that SP snuffs were Spanish snuffs, the kind of abbreviation from the barrels on the galleons that were seized. I did do a video about snuff before. I talk about that in there, but I also heard it referred to Sheffield Pride a couple of times yesterday as well. So Wilson's SP, it's either SP to represent the Spanish snuffs that were illegally sold in the UK around that time, or it stands for Sheffield Pride. It's debatable. There's no records, as in 1763 a fire destroyed all of the stocks, records, and a lot of the mill itself, which all had to be rebuilt. Up until 1797, it was purely controlled by the Waterwheel, which luckily I did manage to get plenty of footage and information on the Waterwheel, so I can show you that in a moment. Once 1797 came along, a steam engine was introduced into the factory. At the time, basically how much was needed to be manufactured was vast amounts, sort of thing. So the steam powered engine ran alongside the water mill to basically keep up with demand. Obviously these days the steam engine's gone, the water mill is still there, which just incidentally is one of the oldest pieces of working machinery in the country. Around this time, some of the famous blends still available today first came into existence. Wallflower, Rose of Sharrow, Royal George, Jockey Club, Crumbs of Comfort, Aniseed and Eucalyptus, SP, SS, Tombuck, SMs, Irish Toast and Queen's Extra Strong are some of the earliest snuffs Wilsons produced, and they're still produced to this day. The styles and flavours remain the same. So if you want to try a very, very, very traditional late 1700 snuff, I'd give Queen's Extra Strong or SM a try. If you like your floral ones, Royal George all the way. Royal George is spectacular stuff. So basically, I'm going to show you a little bit of the Waterwheel in action. So like I say, this is one of the oldest pieces of working machinery in the United Kingdom. So the Waterwheel, it's a very, very simple sort of process. Basically, water is either taken straight from a water source, or it is stored up in a lake before it's fed through to the wheel to keep up momentum, sort of thing. You saw in the picture at the start, Wilsons has a nice little mill lake at the side of it. There's a little rowing boat. I was hoping to go out on the water, but it was typical English weather when we went yesterday, so it was cold, wet, windy, and very, very wet. So we spent most of the time inside. So basically how it works is there's enough water inside that lake to run the mill at Wilsons for 4 hours. So basically once the mill pond is full enough, they open up some sluice gates and the volume of water drops down onto a water wheel, which obviously then turns the drive shaft. As you can see there, it takes a while for the momentum to get going, but the momentum combined with the weight of the water keeps the wheel turning, which, like I say, drives the drive shaft, which then feeds into a gearbox. Now, from this gearbox, a number of things are controlled. A series of pulleys are controlled. There's also then the milling machines, and also there used to be a tobacco cutter on it. Tobacco shredder. You can see along the right hand side, hopefully you can still see both parts of half a gear. Now this sheared off about 10, maybe 20 years ago, I think they were saying. That gear has been in there since it was manufactured, basically. That wheel is what controlled basically a cutting tool. You can't actually see this, the gearbox is in the way, and I didn't know this until the end, so unfortunately I didn't get any footage on that. So like I say, this is the gearbox, and that drive shaft is unbelievable. I mean, we're probably talking thicker than my waist, sort of thing. How they got it in there in 1737, lots and lots of manpower, cut down trees for rollers, but the size of this machinery is unbelievable. But this is the gearbox. Have a look at this. So on the whole, the gearbox is used to power, as well as, like I say, the old tobacco cutter and also the winches for moving the snuff around inside. It also controls 2 floors worth of pestle and mortars. It was either 8 or 10 sets of pestle and mortars per floor. Like I say, there's 2 floors of these. We only saw one. The floor above is getting a little bit dangerous, I believe. But the machinery is mesmerising to watch, and it's ridiculously deafening. You can see the dust in the room on the video I'm about to show you. But within about 30-40 seconds of being in there, all you feel is just face, lungs, everything just full of snuff. Originally, the way that people worked in there was they used wet sponge and a bit of string, and it was basically stuck over their face, and that way they could breathe and work in there for 4 hours. So this is the pestle and mortars in action. So as you can see, as the pestle and mortars move around, it grinds the snuff around the inside of the mortar. Now, the snuff is put in along with the tobacco's put in along with stems and some of the flavourings, a little bit of moisture sort of thing. The finer snuffs work their way up to the top, where they're then scraped off into barrels, and then through a winch system are winched up to the top floor. So the way the building is laid out is you've got your water wheel and your gearbox system on the ground floor. Then you've got the first floor, which has got one of these sets of pestle and mortars. The second floor has a second set of pestle and mortars, and then on the third floor, this kind of it's basically a gravity sieve system. So once all the snuff's been put into the barrels, it's then used for a winch, goes through holes in the floor up to the third floor, where it's then poured into a sieving, basically a gravity-fed sieve, and then it drops back through and it collects into the barrels. Once the snuff's obviously been ground and it's been sieved, it's then put into barrels and it's then left to mature. And then after it's matured and fermented enough, the moisture level is checked consistently throughout this point. If it's a moist snuff, they add a little bit of moisture to it. If it's a dry snuff, they leave it as it is. And then they add the oils and the top flavourings and things like that. And that's basically the original way that the snuff was produced at the Sharrow Mills sort of thing. Once steam power came in, pretty much the same principle again. It controlled pestle and mortars. The beauty of steam, and then obviously later electricity, is the duration that that they can be milling the snuff. Like I said, the pond only provides enough water for 4 hours, and it takes quite a while to slowly fill. It's quite a small river that feeds into it. The factory is pretty much slap bang in the middle of Sheffeild city centre. I think we're only in the car for about 5-10 minutes from the train station, so you're pretty much in the heart of Sheffeild. So it's an absolutely unbelievable place. You can't really tell in the video, but on the two floors, basically that snuff that's mounded up on the side of the pestle and mortars, the mill isn't the water wheel, and that milling system isn't actually used to produce snuff today. So all they do is they run it a couple of times a year to ensure it's all still moving and things like that. And that snuff is, they just put some tobacco inside and they just grind down a bit of snuff just to keep the machinery in action. You can probably hear the noise, but you can't feel the vibrations. The whole building's shaking while it's running. And another thing, on the floor, I just looked at it and thought, yeah, it must be some plaster or, I don't know, some floor coating. It's not. It's about 1 to 2 inches deep of snuff. 250 years worth of snuff is embedded into that floor. It is unbelievable. I tried to get a photo, but the lighting in there is atrocious. How people worked before the invention of electricity, I've got no idea, because obviously no naked flames can be in there. Snuff that fine, that powdery in the air will just combust unbelievably. Flour does in flour mills and things like that. Fire is a big risk in places like this. I also had to try some of the old snuff around basically the pestle and mortars. How old that snuff is, I've got absolutely no idea. It could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. I was expecting it to be ridiculously revolting, to be honest. I was expecting it to burn my nose to pieces, but it wasn't too bad. It was probably the most uneventful snuff I've ever taken. Very dusty, smelled very damp. But no, it was nowhere near as bad as I actually expected it to be. Now we come down to the most important part of the visit to Wilsons, which is actually the snuffs themselves. Now, I, like many people, are under the impression that companies like Wilsons and Samuel Goworth and Gareth Hogarth use a very small number of bases. I mean, Wilsons do over 90 different snuffs. Now, I expect there to be half a dozen to a dozen different bases. They just add different oils, different moisture content, different cut and things like that. But it's not actually the case. Wilsons use over 50 different bases for their snuffs. And from a big range of tobaccos. Traditionally, Zimbabwean leaf burley was predominantly used in snuff, but obviously in recent years the troubles and things over there, alternatives have had to be found. So Malawi burley and Malawi fire cured is predominantly used in a lot of snuffs. Obviously the fire cured snuffs are used solely on their own in your darker sort of like FT, best dark sort of snuffs. Lighter ones are done with more like air cured burleys. There's also some Brazilian leaf there, which those of you who are cigar smokers and you're a big fan of Maduro wrapper, you'll love Brazilian leaf. Brazilian tobacco is amazing. It doesn't get a very good reputation but for a good, solid, strong, full flavoured tobacco, Brazilian leaf is perfect. They do use a lot of other tobaccos as well, but I couldn't get him out what they were called. They just have their own like codes for them. XO137. I haven't got a clue. They gave away a few secrets, which I'm assuming they shouldn't have, but some things I just could not get out of them exactly what it is. So, like I say, 3 of the tobaccos I know Wilsons uses, like I say, Malawi burley, Malawi fire-cured burley, and Brazilian leaf. The rest I have not a clue about, but there was a lot of barrels of tobacco in there. I haven't got a clue what any of them were. When it comes down to the flavouring, now, many of you know some Wilsons tobaccos are very, very complex. You have Prime Minister, for example, has got kind of like spearmint, it's got menthol, eucalyptus, and other menthol flavours added to it. But the most surprising one is Royal George. I'm a big fan of Royal George. One of my favourite kind of florally violet talcum powdery type snuffs. Over 40 different flavours go into that snuff. I pick out half a dozen at a push. But there's over 40 different flavours go into, like I say, Royal George. It's unbelievable. The amount of flavourings that I saw and was told about there is unbelievable. You'd expect some snuffs to have a very, very simple kind of flavouring to it, like, you know, if it's you just add one flavour, but no, they're built up from big, complex blends of flavours to produce the snuffs, which is why a lot of them have such complex flavours, and there's such big disagreements online as to exactly what that flavour of snuff is. So, as well as the Wilsons snuffs themselves, Wilsons of Sharrow also now make the Freiburg and Treyer snuffs. Those of you who are into the more floral scented, stronger, pungent snuffs, Freiburg and Treyer are the snuffs to try, sort of thing. They stick to the original recipes as close as they can. Obviously there are differences these days as a result of unavailability of flavourings, the changes in tobacco. Like I say, it's very, very hard to get Cuban tobacco in the UK and things like that, so the recipes have all changed over the years, but they're as close to the originals as can be done, and to make them affordable. I did pick this up from speaking to Colin. Probably shouldn't really be saying this on camera, so my apologies to Wilsons if you didn't really want me to say this, but there is going to be some new Freiburg snuffs coming out this year. I'm not going to really tell you any more of it, but I know Colin's been trawling his way through the basically all the old Freiburg recipes, and he's picked a couple that he's bringing back, and he's working on them at the moment. And I, for one, cannot wait to try these. As soon as they're out, I will let all of you know. There was one other fact about Wilsons which I wanted to talk about, basically. Many of you know J.H. Wilsons. I didn't know that, basically, at one point it was 2 brothers that split up and started their own snuff factories. Reminds you of the Gowers, surprisingly enough. But no, the J.H. Wilsons, basically a couple of 100 yards across the road from the Wilsons of Sharrow's mill, basically started producing some snuffs there, and it was referred to as the top mill, which, as many of you know who are snuff users, J.H. Wilsons make one called Top Mill Number 1. I wonder where they got that name from. So anyway, that's pretty much most of what I can share with you from my visit to the Wilsons factory. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you all found it informative and useful, and a big thanks go out to the guys at Wilsons for being so hospitable and for showing us around and for giving us the privilege of seeing the Waterwheel in action, something which I never thought I'd get to see. A spectacular day, and a day I won't be forgetting anytime soon. So I'm very happy to share this day with you all. So like I say, thank you very much for watching, and I shall be back soon. So take care, and happy finishing.